The Galactic Innovation Index lists human scientists who dedicated lives to single questions. Part 1. Ambassador Sarah stared at the data pad in her hands. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense. She read them again, then a third time, convinced there must be an error in the translation software. The Galactic Innovation Index had just been released. Every 1,000 years, the index compiled every significant scientific contribution from every species in the galactic community. It ranked them, analyzed them, and created a comprehensive picture of who was advancing knowledge across the stars. For civilizations that measured their histories in millions of years, it was the ultimate measure of intellectual achievement. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Sarah had expected maybe a few mentions, perhaps some participation ribbons. Humans were the newcomers, the species still figuring out faster-than-light travel while others had been crossing galaxies for eons. But the numbers on her pad told a different story. Humans held 47 of the top 100 positions. 47. Sarah's hands trembled. She checked the authentication codes 3 times. The data was genuine, transmitted directly from the Council's central computational matrix, a machine intelligence so vast it occupied an entire moon. Her assistant, a young man named, noticed her expression. "Ambassador, is everything all right?" "I need to call an emergency meeting," Sarah said quietly. "Right now." Within an hour, the human delegation assembled in the embassy's secure conference room. Sarah projected the index results onto the main screen. The room fell silent as the other diplomats and scientists absorbed what they were seeing. "This has to be wrong," Doctor said. She was Earth's chief science advisor, a physicist who had spent 30 years studying the strange properties of alien materials. They have been spacefaring for 12 million years. They had calculus before Earth had multicellular life. How could we possibly rank above them? "I thought the same thing," Sarah replied, "but I've the data, it's real." "Then we're about to have a very interesting conversation with the Council," muttered. He was right. The emergency session was called within 6 hours. The Council chambers were a marvel of engineering, a vast spherical room where representatives from 47 species floated in assigned positions, each in an environment suited to their biology. The crystalline forms refracted light in complex patterns. The collective appeared as a shimmering cloud of linked consciousness. The ancient rested in their liquid suspension fields, their massive forms barely moving. Sarah floated in Earth's designated space, aware that every eye, sensor, and perception field in the room was focused on her. The High Scholar spoke first. Their voice came through Sarah's translator as clear, precise, and cold. "Ambassador, we have examined the index results. We find them improbable. We formally request an investigation into potential human interference with the computational matrix." Sarah had prepared for this. "High Scholar, humanity lacks the technological capability to interfere with a system we barely understand. I welcome any investigation you wish to conduct." "Then explain the anomaly," the scholar demanded. "Your species has contributed to galactic science for merely 50 years. You possess no technology superior to ours. You are brief, your population small compared to ours. Yet you claim achievements that rank above civilizations millions of years your senior." "We claim nothing," Sarah said calmly. "The index is your system, not ours. It evaluated contributions according to its own metrics. Perhaps the question isn't what we did wrong, but what the index saw that surprises you." The collectives rippled forward. "We propose an alternative explanation. The human entries must represent collaborative efforts, the accumulated work of your entire species. This would explain the concentration of achievement." Sarah shook her head. "No, each entry represents an individual human researcher, just like your entries represent individual projects." The chamber erupted. Multiple species began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of confusion and protest. The Council Prime, a elder named Vessel of Ancient Wisdom, raised one massive appendage. Silence fell immediately. Ambassador, share with us the top-ranked human entry. Let us understand what the Matrix found so remarkable. Sarah pulled up the file. The highest-ranked human contribution is attributed to Dr. She studied the rotation of galaxies for over 40 years. Her work provided the foundational evidence for dark matter, the invisible substance that makes up most of the universe's mass. 40 years, the elder said slowly. That is a significant portion of a human. More than half, Sarah confirmed. She began this work in her 30s and continued until her death. And the practical applications of this research, the scholar asked. What technologies emerged? Sarah paused. None, at least not in her lifetime. The work was purely about understanding reality, about answering a question that bothered her. The crystalline structure flickered in a pattern Sarah's briefings had taught her to recognize as confusion. She dedicated half her existence to a question with no practical application. She dedicated half her existence to a question she found important, Sarah corrected. Whether it had applications wasn't the point. Inefficient, the collective murmured, its cloud condensing thoughtfully. Wasteful of limited biological resources. Sarah brought up another file. The second-ranked human is Franklin. She spent years studying the structure of DNA, the molecule that carries genetic information. Her work was instrumental in discovering its double helix shape, though she died before receiving proper recognition. The third is, who spent decades measuring the brightness of stars to calculate cosmic distances. The fourth is Barbara, who studied corn genetics for 40 years while her peers dismissed her ideas. I see a pattern, Vessel of Ancient Wisdom said. His voice carried a weight that made everyone listen. These humans spent disproportionate amounts of their brief lives on singular pursuits. This seems to be the common factor. Yes, Sarah agreed. They found questions they couldn't let go, questions that fascinated them so deeply that they were willing to spend their entire professional lives, sometimes their entire lives, seeking answers. But why? The question came from a junior scientist, her voice breaking protocol in her confusion. How did they know these questions were worthy? How did they calculate the probability of success? How did they ensure their limited time wouldn't be wasted? Sarah looked at the young scientist. In that moment, she understood the fundamental gap between humanity and these ancient civilizations. They didn't know. They couldn't know. They pursued these questions anyway because they had to, because the question itself was irresistible. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see incomprehension on every alien face and form. They didn't understand. How could they? Species that lived for thousands of years, species that shared consciousness across billions, species that had optimized efficiency over millions of years of evolution. None of them had ever encountered this particular form of madness. I propose a recess, Vessel of Ancient Wisdom said finally. This matter requires deeper analysis. We shall reconvene in one standard cycle. As the chamber emptied, Sarah remained floating in her space. Through the transparent wall, she could see Earth hanging in the distance, a blue marble among the stars. Somewhere down there, right now, human researchers were in their labs, pursuing questions that might take decades to answer. Questions that might never have answers. Questions that offered no guarantee of success or recognition. They did it anyway, they always had. And somehow, the galaxy's most sophisticated analytical system had recognized that dedication as something extraordinary. Sarah just hoped she could explain why. Part 2. The tribunal began 3 days later. Sarah had barely slept. She'd spent every waking hour reviewing files, reading biographies, and preparing for questions she knew the aliens would ask. Questions she wasn't sure she could answer. The council had assembled a special panel of the galaxy's greatest scientific minds. The sent 5 of their most decorated scholars, their crystalline forms arranged in a precise geometric pattern. The collective manifested as a dense cluster of consciousness, representing billions of linked minds working in perfect coordination. The sent vessel of ancient wisdom himself, along with 3 other elders whose combined age exceeded most stellar. Dozens of other species attended as observers. This had become the most discussed event in galactic scientific circles. Everyone wanted to understand the human anomaly. Sarah took her position at the center of the chamber. She'd asked to bring 3 human scientists with her, and the council had agreed. Doctor stood to her right. To her left were Dr. James Winters, a mathematician, and Doctor, a biologist. All 3 had spent decades pursuing singular research questions. The High Scholar began. Ambassador, we have conducted our investigation. No evidence of manipulation exists. The index's calculations are valid. This leaves us with a paradox we wish to resolve. We shall present our approaches to scientific advancement. Then you will explain yours. Perhaps in contrast, we shall understand. I appreciate your thoroughness, Sarah said. The High Scholar's form brightened. The methodology is based on optimal efficiency. When a problem is identified, we assemble specialist teams. Resources are allocated. A timeline is established. Problems are solved within calculated periods, typically 3 to 7 years. Upon completion, the team dissolves and reforms around new problems. In 12 million years, we have solved 1.7 billion significant scientific questions. This is efficiency. Sarah nodded slowly. And if a problem can't be solved in 7 years, it is subdivided or postponed for technological maturation. We do not waste resources on intractable problems. The collectives flowed forward. Our methodology differs. Problems are distributed across our consciousness. Billions of minds work simultaneously on multiple aspects. Solutions emerge from the synthesis of parallel thought streams. A question that might take an individual centuries is solved in months through our unified processing. We have existed for 8 million years. We have solved 940 million questions. This is the power of coordinated consciousness. And what happens to questions that require individual insight? Doctor asked quietly. Intuitive leaps that don't come from parallel processing. The collective rippled uncertainly. Such instances are rare. Most problems yield to sufficient parallel analysis. Vessel of Ancient Wisdom spoke next, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. The approach is patience. We live for. A research project spanning 500 years is merely a phase of our existence. We accumulate knowledge slowly, thoroughly. We have existed as a spacefaring civilization for 90 million years. We have solved 2.3 billion questions. This is the benefit of time. And urgency, Doctor asked. What happens when a question needs to be answered quickly? The ancient was silent for a moment. Quickly is a relative term, Doctor. Most questions can wait. The universe is patient. So are we. The High Scholar turned to Sarah. Now, Ambassador, explain the human methodology. How do you organize your scientific advancement? What is your system? Sarah glanced at her fellow scientists. They discussed this moment. There was no system. There was no methodology. There was only the chaos of human curiosity. We don't have one, Sarah admitted. Not really. Scientists pursue what interests them. Funding is chaotic, often political. Some questions receive massive resources, others almost none. There's no central coordination. Researchers compete for grants, for recognition, for positions at universities. It's inefficient, often frustrating, and highly individualistic. The chamber buzzed with confusion. The scholar's form flickered rapidly. Then how do you make progress? How do you ensure optimal resource allocation? We don't, Dr. Winters said. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite addressing the galaxy's most powerful minds. I've spent 32 years working on a single mathematical proof. I started when I was 28. I'm 60 now. I've published 7 papers on this proof. Nobody else in the world works on this exact problem. The funding I receive barely covers my expenses. My colleagues think I'm obsessed. Are you? Vessel of Ancient Wisdom asked. Absolutely, Winters replied without hesitation. I dream about this proof. I wake up at 3 in the morning with ideas. I've filled thousands of pages with equations. I've gone down dead ends that cost me years. I might never solve it, but I can't stop. I won't stop. This is, the collective began, its form pulsing uncertainly. This is irrational behavior. You are aware that you may waste your entire life on an unsolvable problem. It's not a waste if the pursuit itself is meaningful, Winters said. Doctor stepped forward next. I study a specific protein interaction in cellular membranes. I've studied this one interaction for 26 years. It has no immediate medical application. It might never have one. But understanding how this protein works could reveal fundamental principles of cellular biology. Or it might not. I don't know. I continue anyway. Why? The question came from multiple species simultaneously. It echoed through the chamber with genuine bewilderment. Doctor took a deep breath. Because we have to know, because the question won't let us go. I study the quantum properties of alien materials, trying to understand principles that might unify our physics with yours. I started this when I was 30. I'm 63 now. I've made progress, but I'm nowhere near finished. I'll probably die before I find the complete answer. And this does not disturb you, the High Scholar asked. The knowledge that your brief existence will end with your question unanswered. It bothers me every day, admitted. But what bothers me more is the thought of not trying, of leaving the question unexplored. Someone else might eventually answer it, but I need to push as far as I can, learn as much as possible before my time is up. Sarah pulled up a holographic display. It showed photos of the scientists from the index, at her telescope. Franklin with her X-ray crystallography equipment, Barbara in her cornfield, with her photographic plates. These people had something in common, Sarah said. They found questions that consumed them, questions that seemed impossible or unimportant to others. They pursued these questions despite ridicule, despite lack of funding, despite knowing they might never see recognition in their lifetimes. Franklin died at 37, 4 years before the Nobel Prize was awarded for the work she contributed to. Discoveries weren't fully appreciated until after her death. Barbara worked in isolation for decades before the scientific community accepted her findings. This is tragic, Vessel of Ancient Wisdom said softly, to spend a lifetime in pursuit and die without recognition. Maybe, Sarah agreed, but they all said something similar. They didn't do it for recognition. They did it because they had to know, because the question itself was worth the pursuit. A young scholar, barely visible behind the High Scholar, spoke hesitantly. I do not understand. How do you select which questions are worthy of such devotion? Surely you must have a calculation, a method to evaluate probable significance. Sarah smiled sadly. You don't select the question selects you. It grabs hold of your mind and doesn't let go. You try to ignore it. You try to work on something more practical, but it calls you back, again and again, until you surrender and commit to it completely. This sounds like a cognitive disorder, the collective observed. Maybe it is, Dr. Winters said with a slight laugh. We call it obsession, or dedication, or passion. It's probably all three. The High Scholar was quiet for a long moment. I begin to understand why the index ranked you so highly. Your approach is inefficient. It is irrational. It wastes resources. But somehow, this intensity of individual focus produces insights that our optimized systems miss. Yes, Sarah said, because we don't spread our attention, we don't optimize. We burn bright on single points, and sometimes we burn through to answers nobody else would have found. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see the alien minds processing, calculating, trying to fit this information into frameworks that had worked for millions of years. Finally, Vessel of Ancient Wisdom spoke. We require time to contemplate this. The tribunal will reconvene in 5 days. We have much to discuss among ourselves. As the chamber emptied, Sarah noticed several younger alien scientists lingering, watching the humans with something that looked almost like envy. Or perhaps fear. She wasn't sure which. Part 3. The final tribunal session was different. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent additional observers. Word had spread across the galaxy that something fundamental was being revealed, something that challenged millions of years of accepted scientific practice. Sarah noticed immediately that the composition of the alien delegations had changed. They had brought scholars specializing in psychology and culture, not just science. The collective had manifested in a looser formation, as if parts of its consciousness were deliberately disconnecting. Several young floated beside the elders, their expressions alert and curious. Vessel of Ancient Wisdom opened the session. Ambassador, over the past 5 days, we have conducted extensive research into human scientific history. We have analyzed thousands of your researchers. We have found patterns we wish to discuss. Of course, Sarah replied. A psychologist projected a complex data visualization. We have identified what we term monomaniacal curiosity in human researchers. This is a psychological state where an individual becomes fixated on a specific question to the exclusion of broader efficiency concerns. Our analysis suggests this occurs in approximately 15% of human scientists. That sounds about right, Doctor confirmed. Most researchers work on practical problems, follow funding trends, or pursue multiple questions simultaneously. But there's a subset who find their question and never let go. This would be considered pathological in society, the psychologist said. We would provide corrective treatment to restore optimal cognitive function. And in doing so, Doctor said quietly, you would eliminate the very thing that makes breakthrough discoveries possible. The collectives pulsed forward. We have attempted to simulate this human approach within a controlled subset of our consciousness. We isolated 1,000 individual nodes and assigned each a singular focus. The results were disturbing. Disturbing how? Sarah asked. The isolated nodes began developing what you would call intuition. They made logical leaps we could not fully explain through our standard processing. They pursued tangential paths that our efficiency protocols would have eliminated. 3 nodes identified solutions to problems we have classified as intractable for 40,000 years. The chamber erupted in murmurs and exclamations. However, they continued, the psychological strain on the isolated nodes was severe. They experienced distress at their separation from the whole. 2 nodes had to be reintegrated early to prevent permanent damage. This intensity appears to be tolerable to humans but deeply harmful to our species. A elder, one Sarah hadn't heard speak before, addressed the assembly. Our research has revealed something more troubling. We have been spacefaring for 90 million years. In that time, we have made steady progress. But we realized something when examining our history. Our rate of fundamental breakthroughs has been declining for the past 30 million years. The chamber went completely silent. We assumed this was natural, the elder continued. The easy questions get answered first. Progress becomes harder. But after studying human methods, I propose an alternative explanation. We have become too patient. We can always pursue something later. We live for, so why rush? This has made us slow. Not careful, slow. We miss insights that urgency would reveal. Vessel of Ancient Wisdom nodded slowly. I have reached a similar conclusion. I am 47,000 years old. I have contributed to 17 major research projects. Each took approximately 2,000 years, but when I examined the insights I achieved, most came in the first 100 years of each project. The rest was refinement, verification, careful documentation. All important but not breakthrough work. What are you suggesting? The High Scholar asked. I am suggesting, the Ancient said, that humanity has something we have lost or never possessed, urgency combined with obsession. They know their time is limited. They know they might fail. They pursue their questions anyway with an intensity we cannot match because we have the luxury of time. Sarah felt her heart racing. This was bigger than she'd imagined. These civilizations weren't just acknowledging human achievement. They were recognizing something missing in themselves. A young scientist, the same one who had asked the question during the first session, spoke up. "May I ask the human scientist a question?" "Please," Sarah said. The young focused on Dr. Winters. "You said you might never solve your proof. You said you dream about it, wake up thinking about it. Does this not drive you mad? How do you maintain psychological stability?" Winters smiled. "It does drive me a little mad. Some days I'm frustrated beyond belief. Some days I think I'm wasting my life. But then I'll see something, an equation, a pattern, and suddenly everything aligns for a moment. That moment makes everything worthwhile. The pursuit itself has become part of who I am." "But you will die," the young pressed. "Your work will be incomplete." "Yes," Winters agreed, "but someone will continue it. Maybe they'll solve it in 5 years, maybe 50, maybe never, but I will have pushed the boundary as far as I could. I will have lived a life dedicated to something I found beautiful and important. That's enough." The young was quiet for a long moment. "I think I understand. You are saying the meaning is in the pursuit, not the completion." "Exactly." The high scholar's form pulsed in patterns Sarah had learned to recognize as deep thought. The index algorithm does not merely measure breakthroughs. We have analyzed its deeper metrics. It evaluates dedication intensity by innovation per unit of sentient. Humans, with your brief existences burning intensely in focused directions, produce a type of advancement our longer-lived, more efficient species rarely achieve. "So what happens now?" Doctor asked. Vessel of Ancient Wisdom gestured broadly. "Now, we learn from you. The Council proposes establishing what we shall call the Human Protocol, methodologies inspired by your approach. Researchers will be encouraged to pursue questions beyond our standard efficiency. The collective will maintain permanent isolated nodes to develop individual obsession. Will impose artificial time limits on projects to create urgency." "I'm not sure that will work," Sarah said carefully. "You can't just manufacture obsession. It's not a methodology you can teach." "Perhaps not," the ancient agreed. "But we can create conditions where it might emerge, and we can stop eliminating it when it appears naturally." A scholar Sarah hadn't heard speak before came forward. "I have a confession. For 6 years I have been pursuing a question my peers consider wasteful. I have hidden this work, pursued it in private, fearing correction. After hearing you speak, I realize I have been experiencing this human trait, this obsession. I find I do not wish to be corrected." Several other aliens shifted or made sounds of acknowledgement. Sarah realized they were admitting the same thing. The human approach had been present in other species all along. It had just been suppressed, corrected, optimized away. The council session concluded with formal recognition of humanity's contributions and the establishment of new research initiatives across the galaxy. But as Sarah left the chamber, she felt troubled rather than triumphant. Noticed her expression. "Ambassador, we just had our scientific approach validated by the entire galactic community. Why do you look worried?" "Because I wonder if we've just made a mistake," Sarah said. "We've inspired them to pursue questions with human-like intensity, but they're doing it deliberately, systematically. That's not the same as the organic madness that drives our researchers. I'm not sure you can manufacture genuine obsession." Doctor put a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe not, but maybe we've given them permission to stop suppressing the obsessive thinkers they already have. That might be enough." 3 weeks later, Sarah received a message from Earth. A young physicist named James' nephew had been offered a position on a prestigious research vessel. The offer was generous, the resources incredible, the opportunity to work with alien technology beyond anything available on Earth. He had declined. Sarah called. "Your nephew turned down the posting." "He did," confirmed, pride evident in her voice. "He just started a research project. Something about quantum entanglement operating outside spacetime. He says it might take 40 years. His colleagues think he's crazy. The question might not have an answer." And Sarah asked. "And he said he doesn't care. He has to know." Sarah smiled. Far below Earth's orbital station, human researchers were in their labs, pursuing impossible questions. They would work late into the night. They would cover whiteboards with equations. They would fail repeatedly and continue anyway. Some would spend their entire lives on questions that might never be answered. They couldn't help it, they had to know. And now, across the galaxy, alien researchers were beginning to understand why that mattered. Young scholars were defying efficiency protocols. Isolated collective nodes were discovering the strange beauty of individual obsession. Scientists were imposing lifetime deadlines on themselves, discovering what urgency felt like. The galaxy was changing, not because humanity had taught them a methodology, but because humanity had reminded them of something fundamental. Some questions are worth everything, even if you never find the answer. Especially if you never find the answer. Because the pursuit itself, the burning, obsessive, illogical pursuit, that was what made sentience worth having. That was what pushed the boundaries of knowledge forward, not efficiency, not optimization, not patience. Obsession, passion, the desperate need to know, even when knowing was impossible. Humanity didn't invent this trait, but in their brief, brilliant lives, they had mastered it in a way the galaxy had forgotten was possible. And now the galaxy would remember.